Welcome to Misconceptions of the Colonial Witch Hunts video number 12. And this one is totally off the cuff. I have a couple of notes to the side here, but I was a little bit dumbfounded at this misconception because I had done a presentation October 14th at the Nashua Historical Society in my hometown of Nashua, New Hampshire. And I did it on the life and legacy of Mary Estey, and of course Isaac as well, and the whole situation that happened in 1692 and what their particular circumstances were and what they may have experienced based on the original documents. So one of the persons that was there approached me a couple of weeks ago and said to me, that she had the impression that I said that Isaac Estey had brainwashed his children into believing that Mary had bewitched people in 1692. And at first I thought, well, that's not true. I didn't. I never said that. But I talked with another person who was at that same presentation just today, this afternoon, and she said that no, I never said that. However, what I was describing was the experience that happened in the Samuel Parris household in Salem Village when his daughter, Betty Harris, and his quote-unquote niece, or some type of a youngster who had some type of a relationship with the Parris family, was living in the household at that time. And that Samuel Parris, it is well documented that he had a booming voice and that he did practice his sermons up in his upstairs study. And being a very small house, the girls were downstairs and the girls would have heard him booming out these sermons, and they were fire and brimstone sermons. So these girls must have been very scared. And therefore, they may have converted that particular stress that they were feeling from hearing this into some type of seizure-like fits. And I do remember saying that. But on the other hand, what was happening in Salem Village with Samuel Parris and his fire and brimstone booming voice was a little bit different than what was going on with the minister in Topsfield, as far as I know. Now, Parson Capon, Joseph Capon, was the minister in Topsfield in 1692, and he was a little bit on the calmer side of his ministry and his preaching. So far as I know, I have read his documents in his notebook that year, and I do know that Parson Capon was a little bit more forgiving of certain circumstances and always wanting to recognize people and bring them back into the community, no matter what their sins were. There is one exception, though, I believe, but we'll talk about that in another video, which is really very interesting. But Parson Capon, he was probably more of that forgiving type. Maybe, didn't have that edge about him. Again, we don't know for sure. And the other thing we don't know for sure, and I did not allude to this in my presentation, is that we don't know really what Isaac's temper was in his own household. But I would gather to say that his own temperament might have been a little on the softer side, because primary sources tell us that he cherished his wife. It's so evident in his petition years later when they were trying to reverse her attainder, which they successfully did. But there are other instances that we don't know about that may cause this misconception to come about in other ways. And that is what happened in Mary Estey's sister-in-law's family. So Mary Estey, of course, you all know, was born Marytown, and her brother was Edmundtown. And Edmund married Mary Browning. And now Edmund was long gone by 1692, but Mary was very much still alive, still living in the household, and she was still there with her, her fairly young family. And all of a sudden, in September of 1692, I believe it was September 8th, there's a warrant for her and her entire family to appear before the Salem courts. I would gather that would be Salem Village and the meeting house, but I can't be 100% sure at this time. But, the warrant is, the summons is delivered to her, and they don't show up. But she does offer an excuse, maybe a day later, saying that the whole family was sick and that they couldn't come. Well, that's interesting, because we do know that her daughter, Rebecca, was suffering from some type of illness. She was falling down, and they didn't know what was wrong with her. And then all of a sudden, so she doesn't show up that first time. There's another summons that that is served to her for only her and Rebecca, her daughter, to appear. And the return on that particular summons does not exist anymore that we know of right now. At least it hasn't been found. So what historians are saying, and I conclude as well, is that Rebecca, Mary's niece, was about to accuse Mary, her aunt, of bewitchment. So Marytown, her sister-in-law, maybe just wasn't going to have any of that and decided not to show up. And we don't know, again, for sure whether or not she did show up with Rebecca, but we're thinking that no, she did not, which actually, again, another subject for another video, but that delayed the process, not for Mary, but for the other town sister, Sarah Cloyce, who isn't tried until 1693, and her life is saved. And it is believed that if that did happen, that Mary just didn't show up that second time, that delayed Sarah's trial and basically saved her life. But again, we don't know. We're only strongly speculating that Rebecca Town, Mary Estey's niece, is about to, accuse her of bewitchment. But we don't know. Now, the other thing is that this particular recording of this presentation, actually, there wasn't a recording, I'm so sorry. Nobody recorded that presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin in the comments the similar presentation that I delivered at the Rebecca Nurse Homestead, and I'm going to have you listen to it if you have time and give me feedback. Did you hear me say something that I don't remember saying? And how can I better explain this in a forthcoming video? What things can I add? What other circumstances may have arisen that makes this misconception somehow have a life of its own? So I would really appreciate any input that you would have. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen. And I'll be uploading the Averils of Chipping Norton, my video on Job Averill, very shortly, as soon as I possibly can. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. Thank you.